Okay, so last time we talked about Sutta 24, the chariot race,
Mm.
and that it was a conversation basically, and that those 7 items um, were actually stated one after another in a paragraph.
Mm.
It was a trick question. And the trick question was asked by Sariputta by a student who had become a well-known teacher in a distant land who had never seen the Buddha, but had gotten his nobility from some noble or another. I don't know that part of the story. And so Sariputta was checking him out. And the funny thing is that with each question that Sariputta asked, I think his name was Maniputta, would answer no. In other words, is purification of virtue the path? The answer is no. Well, is purification of mind the path? The answer is no. Well, is purification of view? The answer is no.
Yeah,
Well,
they're all part of it.
And the reason for that is because you need one to do the next. That sila is only a small part, one of 7 for the entire practice. But now along the way, in fact, I think it's number 5 in that line is one that's very, very clearly stated and on purpose. And that is knowledge and vision of what is and what is not the path. Because the important part is what is not the path.
Mm.
And what is not the path is what people have been doing their whole lives, as opposed to being on the path. That they're almost diametrically opposite. So that when you're on the path, you're not doing the things that are not on the path. It's sort of hard to be on the road and in the ditch at the same time.
Mm.
All right, so what is not the path is the world. And yet we have been living in the world, being in the world, demanding things from the world, doing things to manipulate the world, hoping to get something out of the world. Mostly not material goods, those things come. But how do we feel when we get that material good? In fact, you could think of it is that humans' attachment to materialism is really all about self-protection. That a tool is nothing but a weapon. Like a saw is a weapon against a board, a piece of wood, and that you're using that piece of wood to build a house for protection. And so maybe secondary, but every tool is a weapon. It's got a purpose. But a weapon we normally think of as against another person or a living thing, and a tool is used on things that are inanimate. But the underlying feeling is the same.
Yeah.
Because ultimately we're supposed to feel safe and protected by our technology. An example is the technology that they would use in the field in order to get more rice out of it so that the family can feel better and more secure having rice stored up for the time when it's a drought and they're not going to get so much. So this is the deep underlying foundation of why materialism is so important to the human being, and yet it's not the path.
Mm-hmm.
Not the path that we're on. It may be part of the path for ordinary right view, as opposed to chaos To say wrong view would be just everything is chaotic. Nothing matters. Moms and dads don't matter. Generosity don't matter. Karma actions don't matter. Nothing matters. But that kind of wrong view is more held by mafia. Even atheists have a better ordinary right view about materialism and doing things to get benefit. Let us say, believing and teaching children into the benefit of good behavior and the threats that go along with it, like the threats of hell, the threats of a spanking or something like that. But the whole quality is that we as children are beginning to, through our behavior, relating to the world in a way that we expect to get the best things out of it. Where in fact, oh no, the best things in life are free and they come from within. And so this is what the point about that, what is path and what is not the path. And I wanted to make sure that you got that. Because that is in fact talking about the fetters. What is not the path is the second fetter of giving up our attachments to the world, which is referred to as Sila Bhatta Paramasa. Now, that's interesting because the very first teachings that we give to children, the very first teachings we give the meditation student is to go sit down and go into seclusion, and therefore by your Sila is perfect. That's the perfection of Sila, is seclusion. And not only will we work with being secluded from the outside world as the outside world, we also become secluded from the outside world as represented in the inside. And in other words, we're talking about our thoughts about the world, thoughts about the past things of the world, the future things of the world, who am I in my relationship to the world, and all of that kind of stuff. And so when we become secluded from that, now we can deal with only the inside, which is basically what am I thinking and how do I feel? And so as you can see, this pathway that's been set up in Sutta number 24 actually fits right in with the fetters that the Buddha was talking about in Sutta number 2, as well as how to actually practice, which is anapanasati, becoming free from the hindrances and free from the outside world so we can deal with the inside world directly and begin to get the direct benefit from it. All right. So with that, now we're going to introduce Sutta number 48, which now are the first stages, or let us say the 7 stages or the 7 knowledges that come also in order, one after the other. And these knowledges will actually come to fruition in the third knowledge, in the sense that that third knowledge is that point where we have knowledge and vision of this is the path, and we know what is not the path. All right, so that's kind of a midway point. So we could think of that part is the eradication of these 3 fetters, and would be the moving point from the path of Sotapanna into the fruit of Sotapanna, because now we're beginning to get the fruit because we've got the full understanding of what the real path is. And now we can really get some results out of it. So this is kind of the tipping point. Once we fully understand what the path is.
I think I got just a little bit lost right there. This tipping point, you said this was the third knowledge. Do you mean third of the seven knowledges of Sotapanna?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. Which is also that step 5 of the Sutta number 24. Knowledge and vision is and what is not the path.
I see. Okay.
And now that is also stage 3 of the 7 knowledges. It's the third knowledge. And it is the tipping point, or the midway point, between the path of Sotapanna and the fruit of Sotapanna. So I wanted to point that out to you so that we can now start to look at what the path is of Sotapanna. But before we do that, we want to also point out back to Sutta number 2 about these first 3 fetters are now markedly pointed out as stages along the path in Sutta number 24, and also a point in time, a knowledge when we get it, that this is fully the path. All right. Now, in doing so, that's the eradication of the doubt, which is one of the fetters. Okay. In fact, the first fetter is personality view. The second one is sila bhatta paramasa, and the third one is the eradication of doubt. Now, the eradication of the doubt and the loosening of the fetters of the world are gradual processes that happen, but that first fetter that is dropped is almost always dropped with a sudden insight that sometimes is so strong that the Japanese call it the satori. It's an awakening point, a flash of light. And that flash of light comes from the perspective of, wait a minute, I am not what I thought I was. And the reason for that is because we've been seeing ourselves in relationship to the world. All the labels that we put on ourselves are worldly labels. For instance, I'm a carpenter, or I'm a computer scientist, or I'm a teacher. Every label that you can think of. In fact, maybe the only label that we can have that's an actual label that actually fits, because it fits both on the inside and on the outside, it would be I am human. Other than that, labels are not going to work. And so we begin to give up those labels. So this first fetter is also that hallmark point. In fact, you could say that when people get that third point of this is the path, it's because of that strong knowledge of, wait a minute, I am not who I thought I was, because what I thought I was in relationship to the world, and now I recognize I'm not going to get any freedom out of the world, that the freedom is going to have to come from the inside. Okay, so this is that big step, that middle point of Sotapanna is a big realization that allows us to come out of the world, to recognize what is the path and what is not the path, and our relationship to our doubt, because this is the point where the doubt is eradicated. There's no more doubt. So let's look at doubt for just a moment, because doubt plays in big time in the first knowledge. But there is another kind of doubt. In fact, there are 3 kinds of doubts.
Yeah.
I'll give them to you in order, and then we'll describe them. The first kind of doubt is doubt about whose fault is this anyway? Who made this mess? Who is my champion? Who do I go to? Who is my helper? All right, that's the question. And we call it the doubt because the doubt is who in fact is responsible for this mess. You come into your house and there's a huge mess on the floor. Our first question is who made this mess? Why? Because we want them to clean it up. Ultimately, we wind up with having to clean up our own mess. This is what we mean by taking first responsibility. We have to take responsibility for ourselves. In fact, this is what the teaching of the Second Noble Truth is all about. What is the source of suffering? That's exactly the question. Only I phrased it in who made this mess?
Yeah.
This mess is who causes suffering, or what is the cause of suffering? The answer is it's not coming from the outside, it comes from the inside. It's my mess, made through my greed, my ignorance, and my ill will. Mostly ignorance. And mostly that ignorance is about who I am. Now, I'm stressing the word my here because that's the way that we have to do it in the English language. The fact is that there's no real self there, but we cannot get it. In fact, we've had some experiments, and English language fails at being able to communicate when you take the pronouns out. And it's all about coming back to personal responsibility anyway. Even though there is no person, there is still the human. Which, when I mean human, I'm talking about the body-mind complex that ultimately experiences the suffering.
Okay.
And it's that same human that's responsible for creating that suffering and is also responsible for coming out of it. But that should be liberating right there to say, wait a minute, you mean to say that any problem that I have ever had, I can solve it myself?
I think a younger Aman would really not want to hear that. I'm
Right. In fact, that's the whole point of growing up. It's the adult who does take responsibility. And it's the child who wants the adult to take the responsibility. Ultimately, all gods and all authorities like governments is the relationship between the parent and the child. And when I'm saying that, I'm talking about not really in the actual reality. You walk into a house and you see the mom and the babe there. That's not what I mean. I'm talking about ego states inside the mind. In fact, that Sila Bhatta Paramasa that we're talking about is an ego state. And the name of it is called Eric Berne calls it the parent ego state, where all of our stored information is about how things are supposed to be. All the rites, rules, rituals, everything. All of our memory systems are stored in that superego. In fact, I just used Freudian's term for it, superego. That's what he called it. Superego is the storage system. Perhaps in Buddhism we would call it the verbal sankara. So that verbal sankara is all of the stuff stored. It's all of our rites, rules, rituals, ceremonies, how to do things, how a child should behave with an adult, how an adult should behave with a child, and every little possible thing that you've ever learned that you would consider a social rule, that stuff is in there.
It sounds like I'm drawing a connection between this first level of Tao and the fetter of Sila Bhatta Paramasa. It seems like in both cases you have this authority figure that you've externalized, but once you sort of internalize it and realize it's just a product of your own mind, you kind of, they're both the same cause.
Exactly. You bought the story.
Mm.
Bought the story. Now, freedom would be then freedom from the story. But then how are we going to live? Now we have to live up to date and in the moment. Now we have to live according to a new rule. The new rule is dukkha, dukkha, nirodha. Or a better way for us to understand it, rather than just giving some Pali word that we, is very, very unsatisfactoriness or dissatisfaction versus satisfaction. But that's basically the switch that we need to switch inside, to switch off all of the stuff that causes us dissatisfaction. Well, guess what? The superego's job is to cause dissatisfaction in order to get us to behave ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Because it operates from the same mechanism that the reptilian brain operates, which we would call the id, which is where we would have called the emotional sankara. So we have verbal sankara and emotional sankara. And the emotional sankara would be then stored in the id of Freud, or what Eric Berne would call the child ego state, and in neuroscience we would call the reptilian part of the mind, reptilian brain. And its job is basically twofold. And the question is, which job are you going to concentrate on? And I would divide those two jobs in the form of survival, and the other one would be freedom. Okay, which also has to do then with the basic access of security. In other words, if the easiest way to drive my car is just get in it and turn it on and drive away. But if I can do that, anybody can do that. We need some security for that car. All right? So, basically the way that we're going to work with this is to take all of the security issues away from the child so the child can have freedom and joy. Start having a ball with life rather than being burdened down with the job of survival, which is the reptilian brain's job to keep the organism alive. But the frontal cortex, the human part of the mind, recognizes there's no fear. And yet we feel fear. Why do we feel fear when there is actually no fear? An example of that is the student has the idea, I've got a test coming next week. And all he has to do is have that thought. And now that adrenaline keeps coming in and he starts to become fearful. But just the thought. But why is that? Because he's in the habit of being in fear.
And
probably is fear around every test he's ever taken. So naturally, anything that even sniffs like a test is going to bring up the fear. That's his habit.
Yeah, and I think also kind of there's again there's like a rule from the superego, and the way that rule is enforced is by kind of, it's almost like through the id, it's through the fear kind of. Yeah, in fact, I'm not even sure on this, but it almost seems like it's working through the reptilian brain. It's like controlling, it's inducing the reptilian brain to get afraid.
It basically takes most of the work away from the reptilian brain so that the reptilian brain can give you the kind of mental chemicals that are feel-good chemicals, to let the child really play, to let yourself enjoy your life. That's the whole point of it. How can we come to a state of joy and happiness? The answer is we have to come out of our fear, which means that we have to change our relationship to the world completely so that we're not afraid of it anymore. Including not afraid that we're not going to get what we want, because we don't want anything from the world anymore. That's the part that's so liberating. Is when you recognize we don't want anything from the world anymore. Because this is a foundational mentality that will do you well as you progress. So now let's get down to what is the first knowledge. It is stated in the sutta, it is the knowledge that no matter how obstructed the mind gets, the student can clean out the mind and come back to the truth, come back to the present moment. This is the first knowledge. Well, the point of that is that if you've done a Goenka retreat and the Goenka says, if the mind wanders away from the breath, never mind, start again, and you do that one time, then you've just done it. You've experienced it. You should know that by now. Oh, no, the doubt is still there.
Yeah.
This is a process of eradication of doubt, because we have to be able to do this over and over and over again. And that is, when the mind has wandered away, we need to pull it out of where it's wandered to and bring it back to this present moment. By doing that, we're lighting up the frontal cortex. By starting through Anapanasati, we start to do some deep breathing, and that deep breathing will oxygenate the blood, which will help that frontal cortex. You see, the reptilian brain operates in shutdown mode just fine. It's the last thing to go. But the frontal cortex is the most abusive. It's the most abusive thing of all, of energy, of oxygen. Therefore, it's the first thing to get shut down. And so this is why breathing becomes so important. In fact, it's so important that the Buddha named it Anapanasati. He gave it the best name. And so this is the whole point, that when we recognize that the mind has wandered away, first off, wandered away from what? Well, we give it that first anchor, wandered away from the breath. Why? Because when you're sitting in meditation hall, that's the biggest, most important, most powerful thing that you're doing, is breathing. Everything else is not happening. And so sitting there and breathing and taking some deep, long breaths, getting the body oxygenated every time we remember to, is the important point with this, because we also are intentionally generating confidence. Intentionally generating confidence, which is shraddha, is the Hindu word for it. Now, it's normally translated into faith, and I know that some Buddhists will really cling to, oh no, even Buddhism requires faith. Well, yeah, maybe the first minute or two, but after that, we're starting to build confidence. We're actually going to try it. We see it works, come back and do it again over and over again. And by practicing correctly, we get attuned to wanting to catch the mind in its obstructions and bring it back to the reality of the moment, because the reality of the moment is so much more pleasant than those obstructions that I have gotten into the habit of having in the mind. Those obstructions are actually mostly thoughts and feelings associated with the world. About what happened last month, the argument I had with Aunt Susie, anything like that is part of the world, part of the outside. And yet here we are working on the inside, where we can do whatever we please if we could only figure out what pleases us. And that's why the word pleasure is associated with the Pali word sukha. It's so associated, that's how they translate the word sukha. That's how it's used in the Thai language. In fact, there was a television commercial. This was about 30 years ago. I think that it was Cloister's beer or something like that, but they had the jingle, Kwam Suk Nikum Dum Dai, which basically translated is happiness that you can drink. Now, this is a commercial. It was beer. It was happiness that you could drink. But a better one would be happiness that you can think. Because that's not going to get you drunk. It's going to get you happy. But this is why Anapanasati has step 10 of gladness, which, and Bhikkhu points out in several places. Even in the very beginning, he talks about it, but when he talks about step 10 of Anapanasati and gladdening the mind, one of the things he'll always say is, by the way, you've got to start doing this right from the very beginning. This is the whole point, is coming out of the hindrances of the mind, coming out of those obstructions. And by coming out of them, that automatically lightens the mind. You can automatically feel relieved. Oh, wow, I don't have to do that anymore. Or, aha, I caught you. That's one of my favorites. I see that stuff now. And by doing it that way, we immediately lighten up. We lighten the load. We drop all of the mental crap. We drop all of the hang-ups, all of the past, all of the future, and all of the world. Anything that can go wrong, we can think about it going wrong, but the only thing that can go wrong is the world. And look how wrong it's gotten. I mean, you can name me right now 25 things that you'd like to fix.
Yeah.
Maybe 2,500 things you'd like to fix.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? The only thing that you can fix is the things inside of your own mind. So why are you thinking about wanting to fix the outside world when thinking about fixing the outside world is dissatisfactory? It's unsatisfactory to think about things that need to be fixed out in the world. It's satisfactory to think about, oh, wow, there's nothing to do and no place to go. And this moment is really nice. This is wonderful. What a wonderful morning. What a beautiful day. I've got a glorious feeling, and everything is going my way. Why is everything going my way? Is because the only thing I've got going is on the inside, and I can do what I damn well please in there. It's the world we can't fix. That's why we suffer so much, is because we're out there trying to fix a world that we can't fix. And it's only fixed because we think it's broken. But another way of looking at it, oh no, the world's just fine. It doesn't need my tinkering. If I'm going to tinker with something, let me tinker with something that I can do something about.
Mm.
And when we come to the conclusion we can do that, then that is the elimination of the first fetter. Now you're on the path. That I can clean out the mind. I don't have to think about the past. I don't have to think about the future. I don't have to think about the world. I don't have to think about problems to solve. I don't ever have to think about any of that stuff. And every time I catch myself thinking about any of that crap, I'm going to stop. And I'm going to come back to this present moment and enjoy the, the shiverings out of it. And this is the practice of anapanasati. And so when one becomes skilled in doing this over and over again, intentionally developing a state of satisfaction, then the attitude begins to change. So while you're beginning to work on stage one, you're also working on step two, the second knowledge. But it is this first knowledge that no matter how obstructed the mind is or how often it gets, or never mind how deeply I get attached to this one particular topic, and I won't let it go. But every time I recognize that I won't let it go, I let it go anyway, and back to this present moment. And I know that I can do that. Now, that's we're in the process of eradicating the second kind of doubt. And what is that? The doubt about, hey, can you do this or not? Are you, let's put meditation up here. Mm-hmm. Now you've got to climb up to it. Can you? The answer is, well, watch me do that. I'm on my way. Okay? I can do this. I am doing it, in fact. And so that's the eradication of doubt. That's that first step, knowledge and vision that no matter how obstructed the mind is, you can pull yourself out of it. Another way of saying it, no matter how many times you fall down, you can pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and start all over again. No matter how many times you fall into the gutter, you can climb out of the gutter, get back on the path, and boogie on down the road.
Yeah, I get that. That's almost the only attitude you could have, because at least so far in my journey, it's been a sort of constant up and down, and there's constant falling into the gutter, and so you almost have to accept that as it's almost idealistic to assume that you will never ever ever fall into the gutter again, and it's better to just kind of work from this perspective of, it doesn't matter how deep of a gutter I fall into, I'm going to climb back out.
Yes, exactly. And not only that, but it's also important to note that you, before you started meditation, were living your life at a gutter. Your whole gutter. I mean, your whole life was gutter. You didn't even know about the right kind of path to be on. Mm-hmm. And so now, every time you recognize, oh, I'm in the gutter again, I know what value there is in coming out of that gutter. And so this is that first knowledge. Now, this is how it's stated. The first knowledge is supramundane, which means it's above the world. Why? Because every time we throw the world out, we're above it now. Because the world is heavy. It's going to fall down. We're light. We rise to the top. So, it becomes supramundane, becomes noble. This mentality, the first knowledge, is a factor of the path, and it's not held by ordinary people. Ordinary people don't have this skill. Ordinary people play victim. They think, oh, I can't do it myself. I can't even figure out whose fault, who made this mess. And so when I clean it up, I can't clean it up happily. I've got to clean it up by complaining about whoever made the mess. And so I'm going to be cleaning up the mess while I'm completely dissatisfied with cleaning up the mess. Mm. That's the way that the world operates. You have been trained to operate in the world as a loser, as a victim. Everyone is a victim to the world. Everyone is a poor little me because the whole sum total of the world is so much bigger than any individual. All you have to do is look out on the vista of a big city and say, who made this mess? Mm. The answer is no one could possibly make such a mess. It took a whole lot of people, each individually making a mess, making their own mess. And a big city is nothing but a whole bunch of people making a whole big mess. And to no one there feels like they're the boss. Not the mayor, not the chief of police, not the mafia gang boss. Everybody is afraid. No one feels wonderful in that city. Mm. Because the city becomes a dangerous place. Because people are dangerous with each other. But when you leave that out of your mind, when you could throw it out, never mind where you're sitting on a park bench in New York City, I don't care where you are, when you shut your mind down, when you close your eyes and throw out all of the world, you're good to go. Getting that mindset, getting the world out of the mind, getting the hindrances out, so that you can be here with this present moment. And if you recognize you can do that, that's that first knowledge. And it is noble. Therefore, anyone who has practiced meditation enough to know, hey, I can clean out my mind. Hey, I can get rid of these hindrances. Hey, I can experience the joy of being free, of being secluded, of having at this present moment, my morality is super duper first quality noble. Mm. And so we lead that into the second knowledge. And that second knowledge is once we start practicing this, we begin to get that joy, and the attitude changes into the attitude of a lion. And we become we feel like a winner, a strong winner. That winning and the feeling of that winning is therefore what we would call rapture or piti, and now it's a jhana factor. It's also a factor of the path in Anapanasati. It's step number 5 of Anapanasati. So when you gladden the mind, you're also going to change your attitude. I can do this. Mm. So we use that first knowledge so to bring that winner out so that we now have that rapture. We have that, oh, wow, this is so good. And we get the great pleasure from the satisfaction that we can do that. And we've got the breathing going so that we're well oxygenated, and we've got the mind now fit for work. And we're feeling really, really serene, really, really at peace. Everything is going my way. That's the second knowledge. And now the mind is really, truly fit for work. Why? Because we are now in the present moment. We're ready to see what is. And so the third knowledge then, back to where we started with in this talk, is to see the Dhamma. Mm. This is actually the eradication now of that third doubt, because we can see from this vantage point of this first jhana, we can see the reality of the situation in depth and in regard to the Buddhist path. And we recognize for sure that this is the path, and I have the knowledge that this is the path and this is not the path. This is that eradication of that third doubt, and one of the things we recognize is, oh, believing in magic is not the path. Believing in gods, believing in Christian stories, believing in Muslim stories, believing in Hindu stories is not the path, because all of those are worldly stories. In that regard, the supramundane means above the world, where supernatural is still in the world. In fact, supernatural is in the world because almost all of the people in the world have supernatural thoughts in the world. So you have the natural, then the supernatural, which is delusionary, and then you have the supramundane, which is above the world. And that's the one that really sees right through all of the magic, all of the rites, rules, rituals, ceremonies, and everything associated with the world. So we begin to see through the magic. And so all the magical stories that you have been told about who you are don't hold weight anymore. For instance, a soul. There's no reason to believe in a soul, because if I do believe in a soul, that will cause a certain amount of suffering, a certain amount of dissatisfaction. If I've got a soul, I got to take care of it. If there's no soul to watch over or to take care of, then I don't need God to watch over it and take care of it and kick it down the road if you don't like it. And so we can give up all the magic beliefs. This is when we first really start to eradicate personality view. It's through this third doubt eradication. Once we eradicate the doubt about the past, we also eradicate the doubt about who am I? Because I've been seeing myself in relationship to the world all of this time, and in fact, I need to stop relating to the world altogether and start relating to how good I can feel on the inside. And I'm getting pretty good at it now with all this rapture and satisfaction I've been manufacturing. And that's when you begin to realize, oh yes, this is the path. Wow. Because nothing else I've ever tried has allowed me to come out of suffering. Has allowed us to come out of our dissatisfaction. If you believe in rebirth, then believing in it is dissatisfying. It's unsatisfying to believe in rebirth. That means I got to watch my P's and Q's or whatever like that, because that karma machine is going to come bust my ass if I misbehave. It also has a whole lot to do with past and future. And so you can see how these teachings of karma are actually quite worldly. Teachings about a God in heaven. That's a very worldly kind of thing, because even if you look at it from the perspective of hell, how many different, let us say, artist renditions of hell have you seen?
At least a few. I mean, many.
And all of them have to do with the torturing of the body, a suffering body, a worldly thing. Why? Because it's really hard for the artist to depict dissatisfactoriness that's a mental state. So they always draw it back to the physical reality. And so they say hell is a physical thing because it's actually part of the world. It's part of the way that the world thinks. And in fact, there's a joke about that. And that is a street corner. There is an atheist and a priest arguing. And a Buddhist walks up and he hears his argument going on. And the atheists say, there ain't no hell. And the Christian says, the hell there ain't. And the Buddhist smiles and he says to them, hell, you're both in it right now. Why? Because they're in a state of dissatisfaction, arguing over the existence of hell. That's why it is a worldly thing. All magical stuff belongs to the world. But we're going to rise above the world. We're going to go to a more noble mentality. And that's what that third stage is all about, is coming to the conclusion, oh, I'm going to live my life a completely different way now. Because I'm not going to be living my life according to the world. I'm going to live my life according to the high standards that I'm setting for myself inside as a human, not as a soul, or not as a person that has a label on it that's associated with the outside world, but just what's here, the Sotapanna, the four foundations, the body, the feeling, the mind objects. So we're going to put in the mind the kind of objects that will keep us in a state of satisfaction, and we're going to keep out of the mind the kinds of thoughts that take us out of satisfaction back into the world. So these are the first three. And so next time that you call, we'll finish up with the rest of them, because, wow, now we're getting up to the point of midpoint of Sotapanna. If you think about it like this, almost any Westerner who becomes a monk has already dedicated himself enough. He knows that he can do this. So I would go so far as to say that the number of Sotapannas out there is much larger than most people think, at least because they're on the path, that they've already got the point that, hey, I can do this. Most don't, but I would say 10, 20% of them out there, they're doing it. And of all the millions who are trying, 20%, we're up in the hundreds of thousands level. So the question for you is, can you also be noble? Now, before we finish this, let's relate Sutta number 48 that we've covered back with 24. That first step of purification of sila is, in fact, the first step of Sutta number 48. It's the same knowledge. Why? No matter how obstructed the mind is, in other words, no matter how much dirt I've still got left in the mind, I, for this moment, can clean that stuff out and purify my mind of sila. Okay? And now the second one is purification of the mind is actually now going to be first jhana, that I can maintain this state of sukha that is free from ill will, thoughts of the world, etc., like that, and stay focused on what's going on. Okay? And then the eradication of doubt and the eradication of the Sila Bhatta Paramasa then gives that point in Sutta number 24 of knowledge and vision of what is and what is not the path. I think that's like step 5 in the Sutta number 24. That is the third knowledge.
Okay.
So Sutta number 24 brings things out a little bit. What he's actually expanding on is point number 3. But point number 3 is really expanded upon in Sutta number 2. In Bodhi's translation, it is verse number 11, where it says, he's talking about what is worthy of our attention. Well, now, if you can pay attention to something and you've got a mind that's fit for actually paying attention to something, then that would be a state of mind that we could consider first jhana. If you're actually paying attention. Now, in that sutta, it talks about what are things that are not worthy of paying attention to. Well, the past, the future, how I relate to the world, who am I, what am I, that kind of question. But what's worthy of paying attention to is this is dissatisfying. In other words, my thoughts are dissatisfying. It's worthwhile paying attention to any dissatisfying thoughts that come in. We also can look at this is the source of that dissatisfaction that I'm experiencing. And now we can come into the third noble truth, and that third noble truth is the doozy. Yet many teachers don't talk so much about it, but you as a student have to experience that third noble truth to get yourself into a state that you can say, okay, this is good enough now. I am out of a dissatisfying and I'm in a completely satisfying state of mind. That satisfaction is cool. That satisfaction is actually going in the direction of nibbana. In fact, you could even call it a little nibbana. Completely cool, which is also that state of satisfaction. So now you're beginning to see, wait a minute, all this stuff centers around this issue about becoming satisfied.
Yeah.
To experience that third noble truth. And the way that we get there is through practicing those elements of the path that we started with, and that is one's right view and sati. The whole point is to keep remembering to do this over and over and over and over again. Keep remembering that you can be happy. You don't have to think about the world. You don't have to be dissatisfied with 2,500 things you find wrong with the world. You can be happy instead. And so now you're going to see all of these sutras tie in together very, very tightly. And the way that they worked is he just described something to a group of students. He described something else to another group of students, and he described the third thing to a third group of students. But now we can see, oh, wait a minute, I can see how he was thinking. We can see this thread that moves back and forth between these things, that they're not separate, that they're actually just one teaching. And that one teaching is that you can be free from suffering. You can do it. All you have to do is remember. Pull yourself out of it. And that's the path. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Absolutely.
All right. Yeah, I can do it.
Yeah, you can. I know you can.
Thank you.
All right. Well, let's leave this here and we'll continue on next time.
Yes.